Welcome to It's All Her, the podcast for women who want to live simpler, better lives. I'm your host, Jordy Lucas. I'm the founder and editor of It's All Her. I'm a mum to a toddler, and I was an actor in a previous life. Each week, I'm joined by a guest to talk about their life, their work, and of course, how they make life simpler and better. For the latest, head to itsallher.com or follow us on socials. Let's get to this week's episode. Hello, how are you? How has your week been? I hope you enjoyed last week's first episode for the year and our very first episode of our new series Behind Her Brand with Christy from Mum Power. If you are a mum and have social media, which let's be real, we all do, you should definitely go and have a listen to that one. My week has been slightly hectic. Work is in full force, and whilst that excites me, I have recently been diagnosed with ADHD and have no executive function, so it feels like my brain is a web browser with a million different tabs open right now. Yesterday I had a bit of a meltdown, a bit of a mentee bee, so I scheduled some time to see my psych, and he actually said something that made me tear up, and I want to share it with you because I think it's really important. I've only been seeing him for a few weeks, but I already really like him. He's an older Jewish man and he is no nonsense, which I really need in my life. But he was telling me about this Jewish proverb, and it's all about how we're told to treat others, how we want to be treated, but how about thinking about how we treat ourselves and how do we speak to ourselves, how do we love ourselves. And as he was saying this, I started crying because I realized that I don't speak very nicely to myself. And I can't really remember the last time that I cut myself some slack or just gave myself a pat on the back. And as we were finishing up, he wrote me a prescription for some medication, and then he handed me another prescription which had 4 little mantras that I have to say to myself each morning. And I've never been into affirmations or anything like that. It just feels a bit woo-woo for me. But this is just a small way to try and rewire the way that I talk to myself and the way that I frame what's going on in my mind and in my life. So my tip for making life simpler and better this week is for you to start each day saying something kind to yourself, or just even acknowledging something that you like about yourself or who you are, or a recent little achievement. And it doesn't have to be anything huge. It's just little acknowledgements. Right, there's my TED Talk for the week. Let's get to this week's guest. Georgie Tunny is an Australian journalist who got her start at the ABC, and she's now a part of the brand new team at the project. I went into Channel 10 to catch up with Georgie to talk about her exciting new role, how she feels about cancel culture, why she might just elope with her fiancé Rob Mills, and more. Here's my chat with Georgie Tunny. Georgie, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast this week. I'm so excited to have a chat. How has the year begun with everything at the project?
A whirlwind.
Yeah.
A whirlwind. It has been crazy, but honestly, the best experience probably of my working life, certainly. Yeah. And I'm so excited for the year ahead. Like, I've been so fortunate in the last 6 months or so to get the opportunity to have all these fantastic experiences, and I'm really, really excited for 2023 and what's going to come, and working with the new team. I can only be good, I think.
Yeah, totally. Let's take it back to early life, early aspirations. What was young Georgie like? What were her goals?
It's funny that you say that, because from like year 7, so what's that, in Queensland, I would have been 12, 13? 12? Good maths from you. I was 2003, so if I take the 1 away, that means it was 12. And everyone was like, you do those exercises, what do you want to be when you're older? What do you want to do? And my answer was always a sports journalist. That's what I wanted to do. I just had this clear thought, because I grew up a kid in Brisbane in the suburbs just loving the Olympics. So I was never particularly very good at any sport.
Yeah.
I could swim, I could play water polo, I played netball, and those were like my strengths.
Yeah.
But I wasn't world beating. I wasn't making any like regional team or anything. I just loved being part of a team.
Yeah.
And because of that, like when you're at that age as well, you know, that tween fandom thing.
Yeah.
But my fandom was for athletes.
Wow. Yeah.
So when it came to the Olympics, like I had posters of Ian Thorpe, Grant Hackett, Susie O'Neill.
Yeah.
Like those were my idols growing up. And then I found footy, and my footy's NRL.
Yep.
So I found footy, cricket, and I think I've got an older sister who's super arty, and it's just us. And so my dad, when I showed like the tiniest bit of interest in sport, he was like, fantastic, let's go. Sign her up for everything. Yeah. So I've always just been super interested in that. And I also, by the same token, it's so weird to think back now, because people often ask me like, you know, how'd you get into breakfast TV eventually? And I also just always loved watching breakfast TV.
Yeah.
Like news. So I was also always interested in news.
Yeah.
And then I thought, how could I somehow meld like these two passions? And for me, it was like sports journalism. That's the way. That's how I do it.
And so, did you study in Brisbane?
Yes, I did. Studied at UQ, so University of Queensland. I've got a dual degree, so I studied journalism, so I've got a journalism degree, and I studied arts at the same time. And I actually thought, I was like, well, if I can't get into sports journalism, I should have a backup. So I studied political science as my backup. So I was like, well, I should know politics just in case.
Yes.
Just in case I can't get into that.
Very clever having a backup plan.
Yes.
Especially if you want to get in the media.
Oh my God. My suggestion to everyone, life advice, always have a backup for anything, especially media.
Yeah, totally. So it's a notoriously difficult industry to crack into. What was your break, or that one job that sort of changed things?
It was a cadetship with the ABC in 2014. So I graduated 2013, and I just had these moments. I had this moment of panic, being like, what am I going to do? Like, it's so great that, you know, great, I've got all these qualifications, whatever now.
Yep.
But what does that actually mean? What is it worth? How do I get my foot in the door? Like, I don't know anyone. I'm not from a media family. Like, I have no contacts anywhere. So I was like, what will I do? What will I do? And I was just like searching. Literally, I think I was just like searching through ABC. And I remember looking at their like intern page and like, anything for careers. And I was like, yep. And there was one there, and it was actually it was too perfect. It was funny. So it was very niche. It was an internship, fully paid internship for a woman in broadcast sport.
Wow.
And I was like, hang on a second.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah.
So I saw it, and I was like, and they asked, you know, your resume and all this, and I was like, I've got absolutely nothing interesting to put there, but I'll go for it. And then crazily enough, they called me and said, you've got an interview, we're going to fly you to Sydney. And then I remember walking into the doors, and there was this big boardroom, and I had the big boss of ABC Sport at that time.
Yeah.
And there was a quiz on the desk, and it was like to test your knowledge about how much sport you actually did know.
Oh, wow.
And I remember I got about halfway through, and I thought, I failed this. That was the only test in my life. I'm such a nerd. I'm such an academic. I was like, it's the only test in my life I've failed. And I was like, well, that's such a shame, because I actually really wanted it. And it wasn't until that point that I was like, oh, it would have been fun to get that. Because I was just like, I've not got it. And then a week later, I was working in my retail job at Sunburn. And my manager called me, and she said, like, called the store phone, and she was like, you need to stay by your mobile. You're going to have a phone call. You need to take it.
Yeah.
And I remember I took it, and it was them being like, we'd like to offer you the internship. And I had to move in 2 weeks. So I moved from Brisbane to Sydney, and then, I was full into it. Which was crazy.
Yeah. And what was that like, cutting your teeth in at the ABC, one of the most respected news outlets in Australia? Like, what was that like?
It was hands down the best training ground I possibly could have had.
Yep.
Because I always had wanted to do broadcast media, and I got the opportunity to do that. But I also had the opportunity to write online articles, research online articles, produce and present a weekly radio show based on the W League, as it was known then. Now it's A-League Women's. Like, I just got to do an insane amount of stuff that I hadn't realised at the time, but now looking back, like, you know, that would probably take someone who didn't get that opportunity maybe 4 years to realistically get to do all of those things that I got to do in 1 year.
Yeah.
Like, it just meant, like, I got auto cue training
Yes.
at 22, and I got voice coaching. Like, I remember rocking up to my first voice coaching lesson, and I was like, oh, I'll nail this. I can read. This is going to be great. And she was like, she sat there and she's like, read that sentence. And I was like, here we go. Love it. Love praise. This is going to be amazing. And I read it and she was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So you have like this really annoying sing-song voice pattern. It sounds like you're from Queensland. And I was like, I am from Brisbane. Yeah. And so that kind of opportunity, just learning to speak with more authority. You know, I know people that are coming through the ranks now that don't even get that. And while I think in a way it's a good thing, because I prefer people to speak conversationally when they're presenting the news rather than that newsreader drawl. And I think it's very, very slowly changing, and people are wanting that as well.
Yeah.
It was just such an incredible experience. Like, I was so lucky to do all that. And then I remember it came to the end of the internship, and I started working with the ABC News channel the day after.
Wow.
Yeah.
How do you think social media is kind of delineating the way news is presented? You said before that typical old school training that newsreaders would get, whereas now things like TikTok, Twitter, news is being delivered in so many different ways. Do you still prefer the old school way, or do you think this sort of change is exciting?
I think both can exist.
Yeah.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. And that's exciting for me, because I will always love TV. I'll always love broadcast. In saying that, you know, if I'm watching it on a TV screen or if I'm watching it on my phone screen, I don't see too much difference between that. Like, I'm still going to be consuming it. So I think that what news organisations have done now with TikTok and Instagram and that social content is so clever, especially after the pandemic, when everyone's attention spans are -4.
Yes.
And with this new generation coming through, you really have to get their attention. And if you can get it, they might stay around for longer. But I think it's so important to at least try to get their attention, because you need an informed audience.
Yes.
And that is your duty working in the news, is to inform people.
Yeah.
I also think at the same time, though, it is worrying, because there is just an oversaturation of content, and you have to work that little bit harder to know what is trusted, what is real, and what is just someone's opinion.
Yes.
There's a space for both, but being able to critically analyse and acknowledge and work it out is more important than ever, and I think we're slowly losing that skill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you strike that balance on the project? Because obviously it's news delivered differently.
Yeah.
And you do deliver the news, but there is room for you guys to deliver your own opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you sort of strike that balance of being informed but then being personable on screen and delivering your point of view on something?
It's probably been one of the biggest challenges for me, making the crossover from ABC, has been not being scared to have an opinion.
Yeah.
And I think if you have an opinion, you just have to be able to back it up.
Yeah.
So knowing that I can see an issue and I will work and do the research, get all of the sources so that I can have a very well-rounded opinion on that. And also, though, not be so cemented in that I can't hear anyone else's voice.
Yeah.
That, I think, is key too. So Waleed and I always have these different conversations, because he'll be like, yes, but what if it's like that? And I'm like, yeah, but blah, blah, blah. And then he'll go, yes, but this. And I'll be like, yes, but this. And so that I love, because he is the most thoughtful person I've ever met, in that he will think about everything from every point of view, with absolutely no opinion or putting his own biases on there.
Yeah.
He's just genuinely interested in everything.
Yeah.
And so that has been such a huge learning tool for me, and has given me kind of the confidence to do the same.
Yes.
And I think that the show now, especially with the new team moving forward, is that it's really exciting, because us as a group, we really are representative of Australia now. There's younger voices, there's diverse voices, there's older voices, and there's also the ability to go from hard news to fun.
Yeah.
And I never see that as a bad thing, because that's what people have to deal with in everyday life.
Yeah.
You know, they could be having the worst day of their lives, but then something still makes them laugh. Like, you know, people can adjust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there an element of you that's perhaps scared of cancel culture? Because it feels as though, I mean, as when I watch the news and then, you know, scroll social media, people will pull apart certain things that you say, or they'll be nitpicking. Is there an element of being scared of cancel culture?
I think there is, but I think it's a detriment to the product
Yep.
that you're producing or that you're wanting people to consume. If you're self-censoring, then I don't see that as progressive, if that makes sense. And really that's your intention, is to not offend anyone, to be as progressive as possible, to see everything. But if you're also then not speaking and because you're afraid of being cancelled, then that is one opinion that's not getting heard, and maybe it's really worthwhile. And there'll be so many viewers at home that have that, potentially share that opinion. So if you're not voicing it and you have a platform, how on earth will they get to voice it? How will they get to learn if maybe their opinion needs to mold and move and be more informed so that they can think about something in a different way, you know? Yeah. So I think it is a worry, but I feel like sometimes it can go too far the other way. Yeah.
So the project has had a huge revamp this year, a whole new team. What was your first reaction when they asked you to come on board full time?
Excitement.
Yeah.
I was so excited. I was like, I just remember thinking, because I have watched the project, for years.
Yeah.
I think it's been on what? Carrie said, she was on there for 13 years. I grew up watching her.
Yeah.
I grew up watching this team. And so to be able to now be part of it full time, it sounds so cliche, but it kind of is like that dream come true.
Yeah.
Because I have always wanted to have variety in what I do and cover an array of topics. Like, I got into this industry wanting to do sports journalism, but then I found that I was actually a news addict, and I do love politics, and because I studied politics, I'm like, I actually do find this incredibly interesting, and you've got the adrenaline rush of live TV and breaking news, and the project, I think, is the best amalgamation of all of that.
Yeah.
There's no other program where you can kind of have all of those elements, and then adding, the social aspect now with different TikTok, Instagram, things like that, and being able to have that as a reliable and factual but a creative outlet too is really fun. For me. So it was kind of like, yes, of course, I will definitely do this. This is great. This is the next thing.
So what does a typical day at the project look like?
It depends on the day. If I am hosting, everyone usually gets in there. All the hosts get in there at 10. Producers, we start the day. There'll be early producers who chase like the stories and things that are happening. Then we have our pitch meeting for the day, which is 10 a.m. And producers will pitch the stories that they think are the biggest news headlines of the day, the issues that we can drill down into a little bit deeper to have a longer, more in-depth look at. And then the rest of the day can be spent doing film screeners. So if we've got some celebrity interviews coming up, we had Margot Robbie on the panel last night. So
No big deal.
Girl from the Gold Coast. I love her. So things like that. So you catch up with that. You do your research. You'll shoot different social videos. You'll record all of your voices for the different packages. Then you have the show meeting at 3, and that usually goes for a couple of hours, and you go through everything that's going to be on the show. And then you're in the studio from like 5 usually.
Yeah, right.
And you do a couple of interviews. If someone can't be on the desk live, then you'll do an interview beforehand, and then you're on.
Yeah,
you're on, and then you're in there till about 7:38. So it's a long day.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is very collaborative and very creative, which is what I'm most drawn to.
Yeah. So, bit of a change of pace, but you are engaged to Rob Mills.
Yeah, I am.
That is so exciting. How are you finding planning a wedding?
Oh, do you know what? It's actually really simple right now because I've done absolutely nothing.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely nothing. My 2 best friends, they live overseas, and they're just like, so what are the details? We need to know things, all of this.
Yeah.
My other bestie, he lives in Sydney, and he's like, what's happening? When do I need to take time off? What's going on? All of this. And I'm like, We've got nothing.
Yeah.
We've got absolutely nothing. So I'm a terrible planner.
So am I. My husband did most of our wedding planning.
This is good.
Yeah.
I may need you to tell me. But also, Robert's a terrible planner too.
Oh, okay.
So that's a shame. Both of us are bad planners, so that's not great. I think because both of us, our jobs are quite intense and they're quite full on. You might find the same. Like it's very loud a lot of the time.
Yep.
So whenever we're like away from work, we're kind of the complete opposite. So we can be super like regimented, ultra organized in the office, and then we're home and we're like, blah.
Yeah.
What's happening today? No idea. What's happening in a year? Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah. Like, so we've actually done
Just elope.
nothing.
Honestly.
You know what? That's where we're more leaning towards, and having like close family there and the closest friends. But yeah, it just seemed when neither of us are keen to have like a big wedding. I'm not a gown person. Like I just can't think of anything worse. So yeah, it will definitely not be a big affair. It'll be tiny. Yeah. And most people probably won't even know that it happens, to be honest, when it happens. Yeah.
So I actually heard his interview with M. Raciano last year about his book, and I was really surprised at his depth of character, which is something that I feel like have kind of kept a bit of a secret from us.
Yeah.
Were you surprised when you met him? Did you have an idea of perhaps who he was going to be, the kind of guy he would be?
Oh, definitely.
Versus what you got?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. I remember when he first reached out, he slid into my DMs on Instagram.
I heard that. Yeah.
He was a huge News Breakfast fan. So Breakfast TV, guys, that's where you meet people. And just so that it's worth those 2 a.m. starts.
Yeah.
And I remember like thinking, I was like, oh, this is probably just a fun time.
Yeah.
Who knows what it is? Like, let's just see how this goes.
Yeah.
And what struck me, the more and more I got to know him and the more often we saw each other, was just that he was there were so many facets to him that I had completely overlooked. Not that I knew him at the time, I knew of him.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, I'm not going to hold it against me for not knowing that.
Yeah.
And he's honestly the most generous person I've ever met. I think he's the most emotionally intelligent person I have ever met. And that was new for me. In a dating relationship sense. Yeah. I'd never dated someone who was that together emotionally. And I was like, oh, okay, wow. All right then.
This is a nice change.
Yeah. In a way that challenged me, because I'd like to say that I'm pretty intelligent, up with it, can really read people well. And he's just like off on another stratosphere. Yeah.
It's crazy that isn't shown in the media that he does, because you just wouldn't get that from, he's Millsy from Idol, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's interesting how the media portrays people in a certain way. Yeah. Have you ever interviewed someone else who has really surprised you?
Ooh, good question.
In a good way or a bad way, I guess.
Do you know what? I interviewed the Kardashians last year, and I've been a fan of the show. I'm a huge Swiftie, but I've always been a fan of the show. I obviously know it, and I do credit them with being a pop culture movement, and they have single-handedly changed the world. Like, whatever you think of them, they have.
Yeah, they're smart businesswomen.
Very, very smart businesswomen. Kris Jenner is probably orchestrating us right now, sitting here, I wouldn't put it past her. But I remember when I was actually talking to them, and it's one of those weird, like, awkward Zooms. It's 4 a.m, there's 7 of them, there's one of me, the internet connection is a little bit dodgy, like, is it Kylie, is it Chloe, where are you all sitting, kind of thing. And I remember, though, being pleasantly surprised with how engaged they were, because I remember thinking, like, of course they were polished and they weren't going outside of their boundaries, but I remember thinking that they were actually so much warmer than I was expecting, and maybe I had judged them on being just this absolute facade, but there was still people within there, within that facade, if that makes sense. Like, I could see the humans there, and it's like it's weird. It's kind of like saying I'm a Swiftie. In her latest album, she's got this song called Anti-Hero, which is about this concept of she sees herself as maybe too big to be a person anymore. And that was kind of the vibe that I got from them. I had thought that they were too big to actually be humans.
Yeah.
And then I met them and I was like, oh, you're actually lovely. You've got your own shit going on, but you've taken the time to at least be warm with me. through a shitty Zoom link.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe that.
Yeah.
Of front of mind.
It's
maybe?
interesting that you say that, because when the whole Kim Kanye thing was going on and people were saying, if Kim Kardashian can't safely exit a relationship without being harassed online, then what hope do the rest of us have? And I feel like we all do forget that she is a person. Yeah. She's a woman. Yeah. There was children involved. Like there's so much that you remove from people when they reach a level of celebrity.
Yeah, totally.
Which is crazy.
And that's something that I'm learning the more that I get the opportunity to talk to celebrities, musicians, actors, through the project, is just that they are people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I love that. I love that. I mean, if I get to interview Taylor Swift, who knows what would happen? It's got great TV. I could faint, I could cry, I could throw up. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah.
I'm not sure if I could see her as her.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed I could. But everyone else that I've, had the privilege of talking to, it's just been pretty lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at It's All Her, we're all about keeping life simpler and better for women. How do you do that for yourself?
Oh, God. Excellent question. Interesting, because I think that I would assume that maybe a lot of the answer is to, set yourself up for success and, make sure you all the things. But in our relationship, actually, with Robert and I would say it's not really a conventional one, in that he probably carries more of the domestic load than I do.
Yeah.
I don't.
Did you just call him Robert?
Yes.
I love that.
Yes, no, I
love that.
Yeah. I've never called him Millsy.
Yeah,
It's always been
But
Robert.
not just Rob? Robert.
No, Robert. Yeah,
Okay.
it was never Rob. I don't know why. I'm not sure. And now even so much that, and he calls me Tunny. Oh. So like his friends, they'll call me Tunny, and then my friends call him Robert. So it's like, it depends. You'll be able to, if you like just met a random friend of ours by whatever they named us, you'd be like, oh,
you'd know who
you know her through.
Right.
Yeah, got it. And sorry, what was the question?
How do you keep life simpler and better for yourself?
Yeah. I know this is like an anti-feminist statement, but if you can have an amazing supportive partner, that's really helpful. But if not, then the one thing that really does keep me grounded and sane, and it's not, I would say, an organisational help, because I am pretty scattered and everything's chaos, schedule's always changing, so I find that really hard to regulate and set in stone different habits to set me up for success. So I can only say is just build your network of people around you and build it well. Like if you have a core group of people, I've got my 2 best girlfriends who live overseas, my bestie in Sydney, like they're so important, because when you're having a crap day and nothing is making sense and everything, you just need someone to be like, it's okay. This is fine. Happened to me too. I do this as well. I've had 48 emotional breakdowns today. Do not worry. You're fine. You're doing okay. This too will pass. And I feel like that is something that at least makes life a little bit easier for me, because a lot of the stuff that, especially in my schedule at the moment, I can't control. But I can control who I surround myself with and who I let in, and who is worth my energy. And vice versa. So it's not a great life hack, but if you can nail it, it's the best thing ever.
Well, Georgie, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast with us this week, and we'll
no
catch you on the
worries.
project, girlfriend.
Guys, keep watching. Love it.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of It's All Her. If you've loved this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen. Stay tuned for next week as we go behind her brand with Sophie from Australian Birth Stories. Have a great week.